brown bag session. I'd like to welcome you to the first virtual brown bag session on professional development. The title of today's session is Landed a New Job, Now What? My name is Kimberly Mealy, and I'm the Program Director for Education, Professional Development, as well as Diversity Programs. And I'm happy to be joining you from Washington, D.C., where the headquarters of the American Political Science Association is located. Today I will be your moderator for the session, and we're very pleased to be joined by two panelists that I will introduce in a little bit. And right now I'd like to tell you just a little bit more about the professional development session. This is the first session of what we hope to be a series on professional development opportunities and programs for graduate students, junior faculty, and other members and friends of the association. This session actually supplements our existing professional development programs and existing professional development resources that we either make available online or at the annual meeting or at the Teaching and Learning Conference. For example, at the annual meeting, we do have a series of roundtables and panels that we hold on professional development. We also feature the working groups and short courses, which are opportunities for you as members and attendees of the annual meeting to attend and to network with your colleagues. We also feature the American Political Science Interview Jobs Service as well, Jobs Placement Service, and online resources that are linked to professional development include the mentoring program as well as eJobs. And I'd like to just speak a little bit more about eJobs. You may all be familiar with eJobs. This is our online job listing service, and it allows individuals who are members of the American Political Science Association to post their resumes and their CVs, and also to connect with existing individuals, departments, other organizations that are posting jobs and who are looking for candidates who have the skills that a political science PhD candidate would have. Over the last year, we've seen growth in terms of the academic job market. As you can see from this slide, we've seen increases in the number of job listings for assistant professor as well as job listings for open and multiple ranks. So this is very encouraging news. And those increases are very large when you consider a 2-year span. So since 2010, we've seen some great increases in these types of positions. In terms of the non-academic job market, we also see growth. In 2012, we've seen a 4% increase since the 2011 numbers, and also the number of non-academic job listings by our departments or organizations that are looking for non-academic positions has doubled since 2010. So today, as I mentioned earlier, this is our first virtual brown bag session. We're very happy to have you joining us this afternoon. And we're also happy to be joined at the American Political Science Association headquarters by a number of staff members that are either tuning in from their offices or in the conference room. I'd especially like to recognize Michael Brentenall, the Executive Director of the American Political Science Association, who has been a very big supporter of the professional development programs that we do here at the association. And then next, I'd also like to say that we're happy to be joined by our panelists. We have Josh Gordon from the Concord Coalition. He's the policy director there, as well as Professor David C. Wilson, who is an associate professor in the Department of Political Science and International Relations at the University of Delaware. After we hear from our speakers and after we hear their interesting presentations, we will be taking questions, and there are two ways that you can ask your questions. You can either raise your hand, and there's an icon on your toolbar that looks like a hand, and once you click that, and I see Charles has actually demonstrated how that works, then we will know that you have a question. The second way that you can ask a question is to actually type it into the chat box, and we'd be happy to take all questions after both panelists speak. Also, we'd like to let you know that you can follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter name is #virtualAPSA. So if you're tweeting or you'd like to send out a note to express that you've been really interested or that you've heard something that's really interesting, you can do so on Twitter. Thank you. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speakers. First, we have Joshua Gordon, who is the Policy Director of the Concord Coalition. Josh Gordon serves as the Policy Director of the Concord Coalition, which is a nonpartisan grassroots organization dedicated to educating the public about federal budget issues and their consequences for the future. The Concord Coalition was founded in 1992 by former U.S. Senators Warren Rudman and late Paul Tsongas, and former Secretary of Commerce Peter G. Peterson. Mr. Gordon directs the Concord Coalition's research on the federal budget, healthcare policy, and tax policy, and is the editor of the Concord's blog, which is called The Tabulation. He frequently discusses Concord's positions in public speeches and in interviews with the media. He also directs the Concord's academic outreach and educational activities, including its classroom curriculum and its budget simulations. He has been with the coalition since 2001. Mr. Gordon has a PhD in political science from the University of Florida and wrote his dissertation on the budget process in the House Appropriations Committee. He also has a master's degree from the University of Florida and has taught classes there on American politics and Congress. He received his bachelor's degree from Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome, Josh. Next, we are also joined by Professor David C. Wilson from the University of Delaware. David C. Wilson is the Associate Professor within the Political Science and International Relations Department and holds joint appointments in the Department of Psychology and the Black American Studies program at the university. He is also the coordinator of the Public Opinion Initiative at the university's Center for Political Communication. He specializes in political psychology, public opinion and polling, group attitudes, organizational behavior, and survey methodology. Prior to his work at the University of Delaware, he held senior positions with the Gallup polling organization and worked on several national surveys examining topics such as the workplace creativity and prejudice in politics. Professor Wilson holds multiple master's degrees and a PhD in political science from Michigan State University. Professor Wilson also teaches courses in statistics and data analysis, research methodology, race and politics, political psychology, and public opinion. Dr. Wilson has written and presented papers on numerous topics at numerous associational meetings and has co-authored a series of articles in journals such as Public Opinion Quarterly, the Journal of Applied Psychology, Personnel Psychology, and Gallup Management Journal. We'd like to welcome both of our speakers. And we'd also like to, at this point, learn a little bit more about who's joining us in the audience. So what we would like to do is to take a quick poll to see if we can find out a little bit more about you. So using the green checkbox, there will be a drop-down menu, and I see that it's being demonstrated for you. And so the green check would highlight an answer that's yes, and then the X would be, the red X indicates no. So what we would like to find out from those that are currently listening is how many of you were or are currently on the job market this year. So go ahead and click on that checkbox to let us know. Okay, so as you can see, it looks like we have 11 individuals who indicated that they were or are on the job market this year, and 6 who have said that they are not. And I'm going to go ahead and clear that response. And I have a second question. How many of you are interested in learning more about non-academic positions for individuals who have PhDs in political science. So go ahead and use that same tool there to let us know how many are interested in learning more about non-academic positions. Great. Looks like we have 7 individuals who are interested in learning more about non-academic positions. Thank you. Let me clear that one as well. And then one final question is, I'd like to know how many of you will be starting a new job in the fall or are currently in the first year of a new job. So how many are starting a new job or have just completed their first year? This helps us to kind of figure out who's right in that transition period. Okay, so our panelists can see that we have around 10 individuals who have indicated that they've either just started a new job or they're about to start a new job in the fall, and 6 individuals who are not. And I do have one final question. How many of you are graduate students? So let me clear that out. If you could show me how many are grad students currently. Great. Okay, so the panelists can see that as well, that there are 12 individuals who have indicated that they're grad students, 6 who are not. And one more question. Are we being joined by any junior faculty? Okay, great. So it looks like we have 2 junior faculty. So thank you for your for participating in that poll. And without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and start with our first speaker, who is Joshua Gordon from the Concord Coalition. Joshua?
Okay, hello. I will run through 2 parts. The first part will probably be more helpful for those of you who are still in grad school awaiting your first job. And the second part will be more helpful for those, well, maybe more for everyone, I guess. This will be quite anecdotal, so not scientific. It's just based on my history and my observations. I was at the University of Florida for my dissertation. I left campus in the spring of 2001, and I finished my dissertation in the winter of 2002. So I left campus before I was done with my dissertation for 2 reasons. One, I felt like I needed to get out of Gainesville, where I was, for my research. I was doing research on Congress. I thought it made sense to be in Washington. I wanted to start exploring the non-academic job world before I decided whether to actually try out the academic job world. So I have a little bit of advice before you graduate, before you, well, really, in some cases, maybe before you finish your dissertation or even start your dissertation. I think it was important when I did my dissertation to have in mind that I might be open to a non-academic job, because I thought it was important to do a dissertation that would help me either way, whether I decided to go academic or non-academic. So I think that's probably the most important thing and probably earliest in the stage of what you have to decide. It wasn't just that the area of my dissertation I thought might be helpful for the policy world. It was really how I wrote the dissertation. I'm sure you all know that sometimes you can do a dissertation that's very technical, working on a very small question and delving into that. And I think we're actually encouraged when we're in graduate school to do that, to pick a small niche to get our data for that and to proceed that way. But I think if you are so micro-looking in your dissertation, it makes it harder to have all of those years and years of research you do appeal to the non-academic community. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're doing your dissertation. If there are a few different problems that interest you in terms of research, you might want to pick one that you think might help you in both academia and non-academia. And also the way you write the dissertation, I think, can help with that. One of the things I did was we had to have external faculty members outside the department on our dissertation committees, and I picked someone from the journalism department to try and give me some advice on how to make the style of the dissertation more appealing to outside just political science. So a lot of you might have already made these decisions, and that that's fine. It doesn't mean that you're in any kind of trouble when you go to the policy world as opposed to the academic world, but you should be thinking about how to make your dissertation appealing to those outside of academia. And when you do the dissertation, I found it helpful to get outside of Gainesville to do my research. Even if I wasn't going to be interviewing members of Congress, it would have been helpful just to spend some time in Washington doing the research. And I know the APSA has facilities that you can use. And really just being around Washington, I think, improves your ability to make a dissertation that's relevant outside of academia. It was very difficult on campus to find a professor or mentorship in terms of getting a non-academic job. And I don't know whether this was the case in just my department or whether a lot of departments have this, I guess, failing. But really, it's, I think, important to encourage your graduate school and your graduate department to try and help students get non-academic jobs, or at least to have resources available or suggestions available if you wanted to do that. I found that incredibly difficult, and I think I would have really been happier and my time might have been easier had I had someone on campus who could have advised me both on the academic track and the non-academic track. So that kind of wraps up the before you graduate part of the talk, and during Q&A you can ask me more questions about that. But then once you get a job, and this is something that I think surprised me, I thought, and I think maybe my dissertation advisors thought this as well, that once you left academia into the policy world or even to work on the Hill, you were lost forever, and that's really why they fought so hard to keep you in academia. But it really is not the case. Certainly being in Washington makes it easier to stay in touch with both worlds. But I imagine most places you would go. There are community colleges, there are small colleges. A lot of them let you do guest lectures or adjunct positions even while you're working in a non-academic job. And I think it's important to stay in touch with academia. Obviously, there's something attractive about academia to you if you're putting in this much time as a graduate student. So it makes sense to kind of stay in touch and keep your academic chops up in a way. And so you can do that also by just reading academic journals even once you're in the policy world, or staying in touch with colleagues. I also found it helpful whenever APSA was in town here in Washington to swing by, attend a panel or two, say hi to old colleagues, and that kept me connected. And again, the APSA certainly does a good job with that. You can be a member of the APSA at very low cost if you're in a non-academic job. And so I would suggest that you do that at least for a year or two. You still have access to e-jobs, I think, which was very helpful. And so those are some of my suggestions for once you get a job. And really the thing that's been so surprising over just the last 2 or 3 years is that I think the political media and the blogosphere has really helped increase the relevance of political science to modern day politics and to journalism and to all of the controversies that we talk about politically. And so I think you should make sure you're reading those political science blogs still, and you can contribute to them. I'm sure some of you have friends in your departments that have blogs. And I think that's another way to stay in touch with the discipline and to keep your degree relevant when you look for another job in the future after your first one, or to keep yourself relevant as a political scientist to your employer. And so I think those are some suggestions. And then I guess the one thing I would also add to that, and this isn't something I know from personal experience, but if you're good at social science methods and SPSS or whatever statistics program, the more you can stay on top of that and make sure you remember how to do regression analysis and all that, I think the more helpful you'll be when you're on the job market. The policy arena is really filled with jobs necessitating this kind of research methods. So if you can make sure you have a good research methods background and you stay on top of that, even once you're outside of the academic world, that will be helpful in any future endeavors, academic or not. And I guess that's where I can leave it for now.
Great, thank you, Josh, for those insightful comments. And as we mentioned earlier, we will take questions for both Josh and for David once we hear both presentations. So next we'll hear from David Wilson on how the market never stops. David?
Yeah, can everybody hear me without too much static? Okay, good. So the basic points I want to get across are, number one, that there are quite a few of us in terms of political scientists out there in the marketplace, and some people who are political scientists aren't even trained to be political scientists. They like to talk about politics, and they take their history background or their English literature background and they start talking about political speeches and the like. But everybody wants to be a part of this kind of political conversation, and most want to get a job in politics. So political communication is a burgeoning field. So there's a lot more of us out there. So it's important that you have some kind of identity when you go on the market and even when you get your job. Second, it helps to have kind of a guiding framework to help you make decisions about where to focus your efforts when you're looking for a job or when you're selling yourself during a selection process or even after you've gotten hired. Because once you get hired, the process really isn't over. And so my basic takeaway is that you should never stop selling yourself. You should always be on the market. You should always be thinking about what your value is. And so in the past, you could do some very basic things to get a job. Have a great resume, have some wealthy family members, have a great pedigree from an Ivy League institution, a good idea here or there, or you might even have a good smile and that'll get you a job. But not in today's market. The market's a little bit different because there are a lot more of us out there. And so you need an approach, one that can help guide your thinking about what you should do in certain situations, an approach that focuses on you, that focuses on your strengths, that focuses on your talents, and that emphasizes what value you bring to the table as a colleague, as a scholar, as an employee, as a peer, those kinds of things. So I'm going to talk to you about basically having a philosophy or theory about how you should behave as an academic. And they relate to these 4 P's of marketing, but there's a 5th P that I'll also talk to you about that's gained more attention in recent years in the marketing and organizational behavior literature. Number 1 is you're a product. Number 2, as a product, you have to promote yourself. Of course, you have to be put in the right position, and so you have to have good placement. You have to know what your value is. In other words, have a price. Not be underpriced and not be overpriced, but have a good market price. You might remember that from your econ or your policy analysis classes. And 5th, you got to know people, because those people are going to help you along the way. We all need a shoulder to cry on every now and then. And so the sad truth is that there are plenty of good ideas out there, and we've seen many of them, from the colored ketchups to the Milli Vanillis to the picnic pants, the Pinto, Mike Tyson's tattoo, and this thing, baking soda, which you see out there. So all of these things have got investment, and people thought they were great products, but there was something missing along the way in their thinking about these P's that didn't get them sold. So your job is to know what your P's are and how to market yourself so that you don't come across as a false product, as someone that's in a position that is in it just because of their degree or in it just because they want to be in it, But you have to bring value to the table. You have to know where you fit in the marketplace and how to continue to sell yourself and make yourself valuable. So the sad truth is not everybody's going to get a job. Not everybody is talented. Not everybody is who is talented is going to have an opportunity to get a position, because there's unlimited demand for positions but limited supply. So first, when you think about yourself as a product, you have to think about who you are and what you do, how you do it, and why you do it, right? And you should consider what your identity is. And the image you see on the right side is about these connectors to hoses in different water systems. There are lots of different kinds of political scientists. The silver ones might be American politics folks, and the gold ones might be the IR people. But even within American politics, there are a lot of different subfields and a lot of different ways in which people go about doing their work. Your key is to develop an identity, something that you can easily frame for people, where you can show some brand equity, show how you are different from other people, which requires that you're constantly testing what you're going to do, who you are, and getting feedback about that. In other words, you should have a business card that when you give it to someone, not literally but figuratively, have a business card that when you give it to someone, they know why you're important, why they should select you and not someone else. Even after you've gotten a job, you're going to be lobbying for different positions on committees, to get in edited volumes, to get your research sold to a journal editor, to do service work at a conference. There are all kinds of ways in which you need to be able to communicate your value as a product. What do you bring to the table? It might be methods, it might be writing, it might be social media, communication skills, whatever it is. People need to know what your talent is when they see you and when they talk to you. So you need to think about that and have that framed and positioned pretty quickly. Then once you're a great product and everybody wants to use you in some way or another, you need to learn how to communicate your value to others. You got to have a PR strategy, especially when you're just entering the market. You need to know that there are plenty of activities that you can participate in, plenty of conferences, plenty of meetings, plenty of workshops, but you need to target those that are going to get you the most bang for your buck. The most precious commodity you'll have in your new job is going to be time, so you can't do everything. So you have to make decisions and trade-offs about how to promote yourself, right? And if you're going into an academic position, you're going to have a workload. So maybe 50% of your time will be teaching, 30% research, 20% service, or some variation of that. And so it's important that you know how to promote yourself given the time you have to do your work and get things done. So basically, are you selling yourself and your skills? Are you selling your research? And what kind of presence do you have? Are you showing any value when people have an opportunity to meet you? Right. Then you have to position yourself. Once you've got good promotion, you have to make sure you're in the right places at the right time. If you think about most products you find in a store, they're either high up on the shelf or they're low up on the shelf. For those who are connoisseurs of wines, you know the best ones are up on the high part of the shelf and the lower ones at the bottom. And so you need to be able to position yourself at the higher part of the shelf. Sometimes that means that fit is going to be very important, and that's not something that they emphasize in graduate school very much. It's more about just getting a job, getting the best job, and we really don't know what the best job is. It involves, can you have good relationships with your colleagues? Is the regional location going to be a good place for you so you can do work outside of academia, maybe community service, those kinds of things? So finding a good place for you to sell your product is very important. And you should not just be someone that is a replacement counterpart. You should also be able to complement other parts in a department or in some kind of working group. Right? So don't limit yourself just by saying, I am only this. Show how you can add value to others and what they're doing. And when you're communicating with people, make sure that you make a good impression. Right? So if someone tries a product for the very first time and it fails, it doesn't do a good job, it's usually because that product wasn't tested very well. So when you're out there doing your conference presentations and your job talks, make sure you really put in time to practice. Or even if you're giving a talk to your department, or if you're going to give a talk to another private sector company or nonprofit, make sure you're practicing. You're following those same basic rigorous methods that help you make a good impression. And basically, are you top of mind when people think about products that are similar to you? You want to be attractive. You want to be sold. Then you have price. You have to understand your value. And given that we have a larger number of people majoring or studying political science and more positions, there's going to be a lot of kind of mixture of value out there. So you have to be versatile. You have to know what you bring to the table. And you have to remember that what you bring is not always in demand. So you have to kind of shift what your value is. There are times when folks go on the market when they need to decrease their value. So why should people invest in you? It's very important for you to have a good answer for that question. And lastly, people. We can't do this alone. You need people to talk to. You need champions. You need a best friend in the discipline, someone you can talk to. You need to know your competitors. Everyone needs to have a Darth Vader or a Magneto, someone who is their arch enemy that can keep them balanced, let them know where they are in terms of their work, when they're falling behind, and those kinds of things. So you can't do it alone. So it's important that you balance and build relationships in your career just so you can make your life more enjoyable. So ultimately, those 5 P's of marketing will help give you some kind of framework for thinking about what you should do. Everything you do should fit into one of these aspects. You should be able to explain all of your career-related behaviors in terms of promotion, price, placement, product, building relationships with people. Because ultimately, the goal is to be sold either from graduate school to academia or to a job, or once you get a position to be sold into another position, right? You want your ideas, your talents, you want your value to be known so that people buy into who you are as an academic or who you are as a political scientist. That's it.
Thank you, David. That was good. That was great. Thank you. So now that we've heard from both of our panelists, now we can open the floor to any questions or comments from our participants that are joining us virtually. So please feel free to either raise your hand using the hand icon that's located on your toolbar there, right above the list of names, or you can actually type in any question that you may have for the panelists. And as we wait for questions, I see we do have a question, I think. Let's see. Okay, I believe we have a question from Brian Harrison. And Brian, do you have a talk button that you can click to ask your question? I don't. Okay. Can you type in your question? Okay, so we will be receiving a question from Brian. And as he types that in, I had a question for David and for Josh. What are some of the ways that you can keep track of all of these efforts that you're undertaking to make yourself a good fit or a complement to a department or an organization? How do you keep track of all of those efforts so that you can produce it when necessary or for a new job talk?
Well, one of the things, speaking from an academic perspective, you have 3 main categories of activities you're doing, and that's one is your research, your teaching, and your service. And so whenever you do something, you should keep a running CV, and you should always add it in to your CV what you've just done. Even when people ask you, even if you don't choose to do it, just add it into that kind of running CV, and then that'll let you know how busy you actually are over time. So your activities you should track, and it's challenging sometimes because if you're new to a position, you don't know who to say no to or when to say no. But if you're tracking all these activities, you can easily tell someone that I'm doing these other things, and this is what I'm trying to do because it'll help me get my research done, or it'll help me in some kind of other endeavor. But tracking is key because it keeps you kind of grounded. It lets you know what your pie looks like, so that when you start allotting your slices of time to it, that you're being effective and efficient. And in terms of fit is something that's more art than science. You just have to really ask yourself, is this some place where I can get along with people, where I'm able to do the things I need to do to be successful? Do I have access to the resources I need? Is communication clear? Do people value my time? Those kinds of questions you have to ask and keep a tally of the answers to.
Great, thank you, David. Josh, did you have a response to add on to that?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Either keep a CV or continually update your resume, and yeah, always be keeping track of that stuff in either of those two formats. It's good to do it in those formats instead of just on a notepad somewhere, because it always has you thinking about how to express what you're doing in a way that's appealing to the places you would be applying for jobs. And so I think that's what the most helpful thing there is.
Okay, great. Thank you, Josh. And let's go back to Brian Harrison's question. So it's in the chat box here. Brian Harrison would like to know, do you have any advice as to how to get information from a university about their tenure expectations? Is it better to try to publish a lot at first or to spread it throughout your first few years? David, would you like to take that first?
Sure. The first thing you have to really think about is where are you and what do others in your department do? So I'm just speaking mostly of academic positions as it relates to publishing. If most of the people in your department are publishing books, their tenure and promotion documents are usually going to be aligned with that. So if you tend to publish articles, then you need to make clear to your chair and those senior members of your department who are going to be evaluating you for your different reviews that my subfield or my discipline tends to focus more on articles. My area of specialization is articles. And so as long as you communicate that, that's a good thing, right? The other piece is when it comes to pace of publishing, you also have to be aware of the pace of how publishers work. So if you complete an article right now and you submit it, you should expect a review to take at least 2 months. You should go in with at least 2 months time, which means that after they review it, then it's going to take the editor about 1 more month to kind of get through the review and send you notes. And then let's say it's a revise and resubmit, it's not an acceptance, then that revised process may take 1 month to 3 months, and then they'll review it again, so that's 6 months, 7 months, and then finally it may get accepted with a few more revisions, and then it gets published. Well, when it gets published, it doesn't immediately go into the journal, so any article you write now may not get into a journal until the end of next year. If you're working on a book, it's very similar. You can get a book done, but once they send it out for reviews and they want edits and those kinds of things, it may take up to 2 years to get a book published. And so you can't wait to the time where you're going to be evaluated and say, okay, I've got this book, but it's being reviewed, and it's not in print yet. They're going to ask, well, okay, well, what else are you doing? So you have to develop a strategy for marketing your research that combines getting your name out there, getting your work out there, but also takes into consideration your timelines. Like every year you might have a merit review, every 2 years you may have a promotion and tenure pre-review. So you have to balance your place in the market by knowing what your business cycles are essentially. Where do you get the most bang for your buck in terms of sending out publications, that kind of thing.
Okay, great, David. Thank you. We did have a question from Twitter, but I think David already answered it as well as Josh about how do you build your CV and your resume. So I'm going to skip on to Terry's question, which is written here in the chat box here. That this individual, Terry, would like to know a little bit more about writing letters and introducing yourself to others. Should you send them your work out of the blue, or should you just write them to let them know that you enjoy their work? What kinds of communication do you find people are most receptive to when you're trying to make that connection? Josh, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, it's funny. We've been trying to hire just basically an entry-level position here, and it's taking about 4 months. And I think the key to a cover letter is making sure you know who you're writing. You should tailor your letter specifically to the person you're writing. You shouldn't have it, I mean, obviously some sections about your qualifications will be copy and pasted, but really I think it's important to personally connect with the person you're writing. And I imagine this is still the case in academia, and it's certainly the case here. If someone sends me an email that knows what I do, knows what my organization stands for, and has some experience relevant to that, that is an A #1 cover letter. And for me, the cover letter, that kind of introduction is more important than a resume, because it shows where their head is, whether they really are thinking about getting in touch with you or whether they're just spreading 50 to 60 resumes out there. And I know it's more work to tailor each thing individually, but it's really crucial to getting the attention of the people you're trying to talk to.
Okay, great. Thanks, Josh. David, did you want to respond to that question as well?
Yeah, I just want to take a more rough and tumble approach to this, because it's a good question, because you always hear that you should get a lot of peer feedback about your research, but I'll just hook you on to a little bit of some of the politics of doing that. Number one, the most precious commodity that professors have, or senior people have even, is their time. And so, and junior folks, people who are new to the market, have even less time because they've got a lot of demands and a lot of transitioning and those kinds of things. So, since time is important, it's important that you come to the table having done your research, like Josh has said. You don't want to just send them 2 papers, for example. I don't know anyone who would do that, but just send them a paper and say, can you look at this and give me feedback? You might want to say, I've read your work. It aligns nicely with some of my work. In fact, your last paper mentioned X. My most recent research does Y. Do you see any areas for collaboration? Do you think I have any I have any direction here? Is this going to be valuable? So you don't want to, if you're sending stuff out to folks, you don't want to create more work for them. You want to make it as easy as possible for them. And so sending stuff out of the blue is not a problem. Sending emails to people saying, if you're going to be at the Midwest or the American Political Science Association conference, can we meet up and just so I can say hello and introduce myself, that's not a problem. But it's when you start creating work for other people that makes them say, okay, they'll be nice to you in public, but then in private they'll just ignore your emails the next time they come. That's not 100%, but it tends to be a norm that there is this pecking order in academia where people say, okay, I've got more time for things that will benefit me down the long run or in the short term than I do for things that will benefit me in the long run. So.
Okay, thank you, David. And we have another question that is similar to the second question. So let's see. From Megan, she would like to know, how important is it to say yes to requests to review articles, to chair panels, etc. as a junior faculty? Is this important for networking, or is it a dangerous distraction? She has a multi-tiered question. Who do you talk to in your department about whether doing something will help your tenure package? And then we also had another question about, let's see, where was that other one? Why don't we go ahead and start with that one, about how important is it to say yes to these requests? And I think the other question was about how do you draw the line between being a good citizen but also being on the right track towards succeeding in your position? David, do you want to take that?
Yeah. So important to say yes to review, chairs, and panels. That question, again, it's about promotion and placement. You should say yes to things that are going to give you more prominence, that are going to allow you to meet people who are doing the same things that you're doing. And when you're in that position to chair and do discussions, you can then share your value, right? But you don't want to say yes to everything. You want to pick and choose because, again, time is very important. And so when you're a junior, it's more important to be at places where you get more bang for your buck. So more specialized conferences where you can meet people who will maybe become external reviewers to your dossier or your research packet when you go for tenure. So if you have a small specialized conference where you can meet, maybe a name that's more prominent in the literature, then you should take advantage of that. So you shouldn't, if you're going to a huge conference, you shouldn't just say yes just so you can go to the conference. That just puts more things on your plate. So you want to be very targeted. And I think the second part was a question about where you go in the department for a tenure package information.
Yes. And
I heard you say that.
And then drawing the line between being a good citizen and, I mean, I think you already addressed that other part, but
right.
Yeah, the tenure package question.
Yeah, so every department should have explicit tenure requirements, and if they're not, you should ask them to be more explicit. No one will take offense to it as long as you frame it as, you know, my goal is to be successful here, and I just want to make sure I'm doing the right things to make the department much better and become a valued member of the university community. Again, you have to always keep track of what you're doing so that you can actually allot your time more effectively.
Okay, thank you. And Josh, did you have anything to add on those last two questions? No? Okay.
No.
Then we do have a question for you just in terms of, and I think you may have addressed this a little bit earlier, but how do you position yourself for an academic job? And I know that was your main talk, but we had someone come in a little late for that, so that's one point that you might be able to address in a sentence or two. And then the other point is from Charles, another question. Having followed placement since I got my degree, and now I'm a professor and question the possibility of finding another senior position, any suggestions on how to connect while still negotiating with the present university? So we can have Josh and David address that one. Josh, do you want to go first?
The first one about positioning yourself for a non-academic job, I think most of what I said before, and then I guess the few things I didn't really, I mean, this is something that maybe people in academia can answer. I might have been more of a rebel as a graduate student, but I thought it was really important to press the professors and the department into broadening how they saw me, and if I needed to write a paper on a certain topic or write it in a certain way, it was up to me to find a way to make it still relevant academically, but they also had to understand that it was important to give me a little bit of leeway on that academic journey so that I could position myself not just for an academic job. So, I mean, my dissertation and pretty much every paper I wrote started with a non-academic focus, and then my advisors basically led me through how to make it academic enough to work, as opposed to the other way around where if you just go along to get along, you tend to be really focused on these academic questions and minutia, and that's good for your coursework. But when it comes to this project that you're going to be spending a ton of time on, I think it's really important to try and make it as much your own as possible. And if you're looking at the non-academic job market, I think you really need to look and see what might help you in that job market as you're doing that research.
Okay, great. David?
Yeah, I didn't get the second question about connect with others while still negotiating with a current position. I think someone mentioned they've got a second offer, or how do they find another offer? Right,
yeah, that question was that they're already a professor and question the possibility of finding another senior position. How do you maneuver that situation while you're still negotiating with your present employer?
All right. Well, the first thing is, I agree with Josh. I mean, I didn't go into academia immediately out of graduate school. I worked at SPSS, I worked at Gallup, I worked at a couple of consulting firms. One of the things you'll find, just for those who haven't experienced it yet, is that people don't care as much about all that rigorous stuff when you get out there in the real world, quote unquote real world. All this, measurement, you don't run regressions with nominal variables or ordinal this, that, and the other, and calculating means versus medians and following assumptions of models. That matters much less in the world outside of academia. They just want to know, what do we do about it? You know, how do I fix it and make it pretty enough so I can understand it? No numbers, that kind of thing. So that actually drove me back into academia because I was really into trying to understand things. And you know, no offense to folks who are not in academia, but the goals were mostly client-driven then, and so you didn't have that ability to do your kind of independent research and independent thinking on your own projects. You didn't have as much autonomy, and that was just my experience. Others may have different ones. But in terms of if you've got a position and you're interested in finding another position somewhere else, you know, you have to play that kind of thing pretty touch and go, because if you have a negative relationship within a department, or you're perceived as being negative, they're going to communicate that to anybody else that might be interested in you. So you always have to frame your job search, even if you've already got a position. I mean, we're always on the market. Even if I'm a tenured professor at the University of Delaware and somebody approaches me about another position, I bring that offer back to Delaware. They can try and match it or not, but it's their job to assess your value to them, and it's your job to assess your value on the marketplace. Because believe it or not, you don't go up for tenure in your department. You go up for tenure in the marketplace. People are reviewing you from outside, so you always have to know your value, and once you have a good sense of what your value is, then you can make a decision about how you negotiate, how you communicate, what you really want to do to your department or that other department that you might be negotiating with another for another position. I hope that helps.
Great, that was very helpful. Thank you. And one last question that we didn't get to yet had to do with given the data that we mentioned on the academic and the non-academic job market, what are some ways that graduate training might either change or shift in order to address these? And I would just respond to that by pointing back to the presentations by both of our panelists. So we do see increases in assistant professor positions, as well as in open and multiple ranks positions, and in the non-academic job market as well. So I would just have to say that departments should really encourage graduate students to focus on their versatility, their skill set, the knowledge that they come out, and their problem-solving skills that they have, and then maybe encourage them to consider the possibility of jobs that are non-academic as well as academic. You know, we have two cases here where one individual went both individuals went straight into non-academic academic positions, and then one individual did go back into academia. So you're being able to market yourself very well, to keep your resume and your CV updated, to keep up with your training, keep up with the discipline, you maintain your knowledge base and your skill set, I think are very important given the changes in the academic job market. And it looks like we might have one other question from Twitter. We'll take this real quick. What's the most appropriate way to address compensation for a position without making a poor impression? So, Josh, would you like to take that? Real quick.
I mean, I think this is a question that probably has been haunting job seekers and people in jobs for decades, years, centuries. It's tough. I mean, especially in this economy. So I don't really know. I mean, I think the main thing is to be to make sure you have information and knowledge that backs up your importance to your organization. And after that, it really comes down to what are they doing with all of their employees? Is there a freeze on salaries? Is everyone getting a raise but you? And really, it's just you know, an individual by individual case thing. I think the main thing is to make sure you always have information about your value to the company, and then I'm not, you know, sure how you broach that topic, other than if there's some sort of regular process where there's an annual review, or you know that bonuses were handed out to everyone but you. I mean, those are the cases where you can step in. Just out of the blue to get more compensation without making a poor impression is a tricky thing.
Thanks, Josh. David, did you want to add on to that quickly?
Yeah. The only thing is, you never talk about money until you've been offered a position. Even if they've asked you what you make now or what you expect, you can say you're flexible, you're negotiable, that kind of thing, but don't talk about specifics until you get an offer. Once you get an offer, then it's real, then you can talk about real money, because it's not just about the salary, it's about all kinds of other things like time, flexibility, training, development opportunities, research, grant money, all of those things come into play. So just, once you get an offer, then you can talk about money, but before that, let them do all the talking about money.
Okay, thank you both, David and Josh. And if you can, I'd like to have us give them a round of applause. You should see your, in the drop-down menu, and just click on the applause button. That would be great. Also, I would like to conclude the session by just reminding you to please visit the American Political Science Association's website, which is www.apsanet.org, but also visit the Grad Student Connection page, which is a very important page that shows you resources for graduate students and for junior faculty, and even for undergrad students. So if you're teaching undergrads and they want to know more about political science, you can direct them to this page as well that you see now on your screen. And then going back to that previous slide, I had listed on there just a number of the resources that we have, and we've spoken about a number of these already, but you can find information on all of these resources online. The e-jobs, the interview placement service, APSA meetings, and APSA Connect, which is the American Political Science Association's professional networking tool. And I do see that we may have a question from Polly Karpowitz. Polly, did you have a question or a comment? No? Okay. No problem. And also I'd like to mention the APSA mentoring program, which is an online mentoring program. If you don't have a mentor yet and you'd like to sign up, just go to this Grad Student Connection page for more information about the mentoring program. And then finally, I'd like to invite you to follow up with us, to contact us if you have any additional questions that weren't answered. Feel free to email any of us. Our email contact information is on screen. I'd also like to thank the American Political Science Association staff, as well as the Executive Director, Michael Brentenall, for joining us and for supporting these programs. And also we'd like to thank Dr. Derek Cogburn from American University and his team at COTELCO, who has been wonderful providing support for the brown bag, technical assistance, and expertise. So we'd also like to give them a round of applause as well. Thank you, Derek, and your team, and Charles for being on site here handling everything as well. One last point is that this session will be made available on the American Political Science Association webpage very soon. We'll be sure to send you an email about that when it's available, but if you'd like to share it with your friends or any colleagues that weren't able to join us, you can do so at that point. And again, I'd like to thank you very much for spending your lunch hour with us. Please stay tuned for more of these virtual brown bag sessions. We hope that this will become a regular series starting in the fall. We will also be following up with you by email to get your impressions and your opinions on this particular session, and maybe even to find out what additional topics you'd like to hear about. So again, thank you very much. Please visit the American Political Science Association website. We look forward to maybe seeing you at the annual meeting or at another virtual brown bag. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.